Hello, and welcome to Psychology Demystified. Do you consider yourself a high achiever? High achievers, or achievement-oriented individuals, are especially prone to anxiety. And why is this? The reason why anxiety is high among high achievers is because they are especially motivated to be successful in multiple areas. High achievers typically come with a list of must-dos, and the list is as follows. If you are a high achiever, you probably believe that you must do the following. You must excel professionally. You must raise perfect children. That you must have a beautiful house. You must keep a full social schedule, and you have to be a pillar in your community. People have to consider you as someone to look up to. Because of all these high expectations on themselves, high achievers find themselves experiencing anxiety. If you are a high achiever, there's a high likelihood that you find yourself having a hard time saying no. High achievers are reliable, which means that you can count on them to complete tasks. However, this also means that high achievers also get multiple requests for favors and for tasks to be completed, because someone knows that they will work to complete it to perfection. If you're a high achiever, there's a very high possibility that you've been asked to join numerous committees, and you've also been asked to join numerous projects. Not a surprise at all. Ideally, this is not a problem. After all, it's flattering for people to consider you reliable and someone they can come to when they need something. But it does become a problem when you start to have feelings of guilt, feelings of obligation that stop you from being able to say, no, that's too much on my plate. Before you know it, dear high achiever, you find yourself overwhelmed and experiencing anxiety because now you have goals and targets to meet, and they're too many, and you start to feel that you cannot produce your best work. That is a huge deal for a high achiever. There are only two ways to reduce the amount of guilt that you feel at saying no. And these are that you either continue to take on more responsibilities to meet your self-imposed expectations, or you lower your expectations to a more realistic level. Trying to take on more responsibilities to avoid feeling guilty is completely futile. And all that you're going to end up doing is having an outcome where you are burnt out and anxious as well. That's the only outcome of taking on more than you can handle. And that's why, as a high achiever, you need to have more realistic expectations of yourself. You cannot expect to save the day all the time by taking on more responsibility. What you're actually supposed to do and what you're going to start working on is setting healthy boundaries that allow you to say no. Give yourself permission to set these healthy boundaries, because at the end of the day, saying no at some point has to be unavoidable. If you refuse to say no to others, you may as well just be saying no to your own inner peace. And you know what? You have the freedom to choose who will be the recipient of your first no. High achievers find that they have a hard time asking for help. If you're a high achiever, there's a likelihood that you like control. In fact, you thrive on control. Asking for help involves relinquishing some control. High achievers would rather maintain this control by relying on their own grit and their own determination to complete a task, even though they could have just asked for help. And there's an irony to this whole way of doing things. The reason why it's ironic is because not asking how to do something ends up making you take longer to do it. And that actually is counterproductive. And in some ways, it reduces the productivity that you want people to notice. So it's ironic and counterproductive. Give yourself permission to ask for and to accept help. Whether you like it or not, humans are interdependent. And that's how we function, and that's how the world functions. Setting healthy boundaries is not only limited to saying no to others. It also involves you knowing when to ask for help. The main keys to asking for help are the following. Remember to be considerate when you ask for help. Remember to make reasonable requests, to express genuine gratitude, and also to find ways to reciprocate the favor. High achievers tend to compare themselves to successful people all the time. Social comparisons are part of the way humans are wired. That's normal. We use others as a measuring stick sometimes to measure our own self-worth. However, high achievers have a very narrow definition of what success looks like. High achievers tend to compare themselves to people who they perceive as being successful, and this tends to skew their perspective. In turn, what happens is that they end up feeling high levels of anxiety as they relentlessly try to keep up with the person who they perceive as being successful. And when they don't achieve as much as that person, then they feel that they're falling behind, and this results in feelings of inadequacy and sometimes, inevitably, envy as well. So if you are a high achiever, there's a high possibility that you're quite hard on yourself, especially when you don't feel like you're keeping up, because there's always the keeping up with the Joneses angle with you. And then, of course, that's where the inadequacy and the feelings of envy come. If they do come, don't judge yourself harshly. Just try and see if you can rewire your thinking so that you can learn to rejoice in the successes of others. And once you do that, then instead of feeling envy, you then rewire yourself to say, why should I not instead appreciate their accomplishments and see it as something that I will one day achieve, but maybe not just now. You also have to keep in mind that their success is not a reflection of you, and it's not a reflection of your achievements. It's definitely not a reflection of what you may consider your failures. Their success actually has no bearing whatsoever on you. And remember, there's plenty of room for many people to be successful. So just because they've gotten there first doesn't mean they've beat you to the podium. It's not one podium. There are many podiums that can be stood on by many people at the same time. It may be tough to do this, but you also have to work to substitute your social comparisons with your own individual comparisons. And the best way to do this is to learn to focus on where you have been, where you are right now, and where you're heading on your own individual, personal journey. High achievers will often find that they're not present in the moment. Anxiety is actually defined as not being present in the moment. And what someone does when they're a high achiever is that they find themselves looking too far into the future, or sometimes they're ruminating on the past. High achievers fixate so much on the end goal that they tend to miss the milestones along the way and don't end up appreciating the journey that leads to their final destination. And that's just how high achievers are wired. But there is a way to rewire your thinking. So it does require a conscious effort to switch off that nagging, why haven't you achieved? We need to get this done now, like right now. I'm not saying it's easy to do it, because again, as I said, you have to rewire. So take the time to slow down and appreciate your journey, because by looking too far ahead, you are acting like someone who's on a hike through somewhere really scenic, but you end up missing all the scenes around you and the views and the mountains and the hills, only because your sights are focused just on the end goal. So you miss everything along the way and all the beauty that you could have taken in as you tried to get to your end destination. A lot of high achievers rely on achievement to feel their worth. High achievers tend to tie their achievement to their own self-worth. This can be problematic because then your self-worth becomes conditional and you consider yourself worthy when you're feeling successful and completely unworthy when you perceive yourself as not achieving your goals and therefore failing, which is a very strong word to use for yourself. Self-worth is an undeniable and essential part of who we are as humans. We tie our self-worth sometimes to our degrees, our profession, our salary, our CV or our resume. We also tie it to our wealth. We tie it to our material possessions. But all of these do not make you more worthy. Another problem as well is that your satisfaction for your success is actually very short-lived, because you achieve something, you're like, okay, got it, what next? So you don't even take time to absorb it. And then your self-worth can take a hit if the next thing you do isn't as successful as the one that you just succeeded in. In other words, you find that there's no end in sight. It just never ends. And this is another time when you have to rewire your thinking and tell yourself that the truth is that your self-worth is not associated with success. You also have to tell yourself that your self-worth is unconditional. No amount of success makes you more worthy, and no amount of what you perceive as failure makes you less worthy. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching. Please remember to be kind, because you don't know what someone's going through. And to you, hugs and kindness always.